Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield. What an interesting week we have had, and interesting things happening within this cattle market that we're going to dive into, including some improvements seen within the cash trade, but the technicals, what's going on there and how is that going to affect it? As you can see, Brad Kooima is joining us. He's with Kooima and Barlick out of Sioux Center, Iowa. So let's talk first a bit of improvement going on within this cash market.
Yes. Maybe you got to pay close attention, but of course we do, right? A slight improvement, I thought, particularly in the north, with some representative trades back in that 123 and even some 124. So kind of got us caught up with what the south had been doing. So a little firmer on the cash, but maybe also worth mentioning is a packer that appears to be a little closer to the knife. Where you've been hearing for several weeks, particularly some of the packers, bought out 2, 3, 4 weeks, claiming to be bought out that far anyway. I know of a number of cattle firsthand that were traded this week, and some of them are still going this week, like tomorrow. A number of cattle that were traded this week are scheduled ready to go next week. So I'm a little encouraged that maybe we're, getting the packer just a little closer to the knife. And if that's the case, maybe we can, maybe garner just a tiny bit of leverage back from them. It's been a long time.
You talk about that and getting a little closer to the knife. Any surprise that we're seeing some bigger numbers as we head into next week, like you talked about?
Well, to me, I would resort back to a little bit of a fundamental, subjective opinion, but it's the middle of October, in my neck of the woods and in yours, this would be the time of year where typically we'd be dealing with a big number of farmer-fed, long-term, long-fed calves. To me, it feels much different this year. There's a few cattle around, but it's not an overwhelming supply by any means. Now, what I can't quite fathom is why we can't take a little more weight off. I think it's inevitable that we're going to. Maybe it's just the inability to really kill as big as we'd like. But next thing I would love to watch is to see if some average weights start to come down. Would tell me we're probably way past the peak of the calf numbers, and we can get into a little tighter supply as we look into the end of the fourth quarter.
I found it interesting too. You were sharing with me some of the numbers and the highest numbers we've seen since January of 2020 when it comes to closes.
Yeah, on a weekly chart, I happened to look at that earlier in the week, probably on Monday or Tuesday when the market was not a runaway, right? We're looking for a little hope. But where we close the October cattle today is the highest weekly close we've had on the cattle chart, on a weekly chart, since the week of January 17, 2020. That's a while. Yeah. The daily charts closed at made 6-week highs today too. So I think that's significant because, we've been talking some fundamental stuff, but everyone knows, I think, that, a big share of our market, Susan, is made up of people that don't know the difference between a steer and a heifer, a sheep or a goat, right? It's a computer algorithm. And so we've been waiting for the market to turn up enough to give those systems a buy signal, right? Open interest, very, very small. New weekly lows, in fact, on the open interest. Less people playing in the cattle futures than they have all year. Some people are worried about that. I guess I really look at that as being a situation where you've got all kinds of buying power on the sidelines with bullets. So, yeah, I'm going home encouraged. I hope we're not disappointed next week when we're doing this again, but I think the market's turning.
So let's look at the decline of the box. Is it over for these box beef numbers?
Maybe this 280 level. Most of the people smarter than me were talking about something closer to 260. However, this would be a time of year for boxes to start to firm, just like usually this time of year is the time when the cash and futures do that as well. As the crowd starts to procure some of this meat ahead of the long holiday stretch here coming up in November and December. So I guess I'll take a shot that maybe this 280 level, give or take, is going to probably catch the boxes. I suppose we shouldn't spend a whole lot of time on that because packer margins have not necessarily been the problem, obviously, of late. By the way, drop credit, off all that stuff is ridiculously high as well. So I think the Packers got enough to go on here for a little bit.
And finally, as we wrap up, have we possibly outpriced the beef market for the consumer?
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this before,
I know, that's a topic that makes if you're a cattleman, makes your stomach turn. There's been some resistance at the meat case, no question, especially at these big box stores. I'm told. Yeah, and in some cases, it's like, well, no kidding. You don't have to charge $24 for a ribeye. You're getting cattle bought at 122 to 124. But I'm not going to defend what they did, but I understand it. You price stuff until they say, okay, that's enough now. I've seen those price declines generally now this week in the big ads. Stuff are down about $2. Good. Let's get this stuff priced back to where it's more competitively priced and we can get it back priced into competition again. So I think you hit the nail on the head. The frustrating thing for a cattle producer is that we just went through the all-time best demand and we didn't get anything different for our live cattle product that we've raised. But let's hope that we get some improvement down the road here a little bit.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much for joining us this week, Brad.
Very welcome.
That's this week's Cattle Call. Just a reminder, as always, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, so they're not suitable to all investors. And that is the Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network.